Welcome to another video. I am Adama Skinfu from supersqa.com. In this video, we are going to learn the basics about SQL and databases. I'm sure if you've been doing research about this QA field, you've heard of SQL. SQL stands for Structured Query Language, and it is the language we use to talk to databases. Database is a place where data gets stored, and we use SQL to go read and write data. And as testers, we always have to interact with database. I don't know about always, but we have to interact with databases because applications use databases. We test applications. So when we're testing applications, we're going to verify that they're doing the right thing with the database. So most QA jobs, whether manual or automation, will require some SQL skill. So in this video, I just want to introduce you what is SQL, what does it look like, and just show you some examples. I'm going to try to cap this to 10 minutes, just give you a brief introduction. But if you do take the STF or Software Testing Fundamentals course, where is it? Right here. Look at the SQL section. It is about 4 hours long, just the SQL part. We actually create databases and we basically work with databases. It's a lot more comprehensive tutorial. It's actually really all you need for manual testing at a basic level, and it's all in this free course. So check that out. It's 4 hours long minimum. Okay, so but here compressed to 10 minutes, but you still get a really good idea of what that is. So what's a database? Well, in this section, what is a database? What is SQL? A real example of SQL. Again, the slides are from that course. So what is a database? A database is an organized collection of data that is stored and managed by a computer system. Databases are used to store and retrieve data in a structured and efficient manner. So basically a database is a place where a lot of information is stored and it is managed by a computer system. So technically, in our case, it is a database. That's what a database is. But anything where you store information is a database. Our brain is a database. It's a database of information. If you have like a file cabinet, that is a database. But we're talking specifically about software. Okay. So again, what is a database? There are many different types of databases, including relational databases and NoSQL databases, and also object-oriented database. But what you're going to hear a lot is relational database and NoSQL databases. Relational databases are the most common type of databases, and they use tables to organize and store data. NoSQL databases, they don't use tables. They have their own way of structuring data. But relational databases are the most popular one, and that is what you're going to hear about a lot. The one that you're going to hear most often is going to be MySQL. It's a brand. Think of it like a brand, right? It's a DBMS, database management system. And MySQL, one of the easiest ways to visualize it is MySQL is a brand. Postgres SQL, you will hear that a lot too, especially in today's AI world. Postgres, that is a brand. SQL Server, that's from Microsoft. That's another brand, okay? So a lot of times when you're learning data analytics and stuff, like those short trainings, usually these days they're about SQL Server. And because government jobs, they do a lot of Microsoft stuff. So SQL Server is just the type of database you're going to learn. But when you do SQL, it is almost identical with all of those. So once you learn SQL, it's going to be easy to learn to basically work with any of those. The SQL itself, the language, is very, very similar. But MySQL is by far the most popular one out there in terms of databases. That's what most likely you're going to run into MySQL. But as long as you learn SQL, it doesn't matter which database you're going to run into. So the ones you see here are structured databases, and this one, well, relational databases, and this one is unstructured, non-relational databases. And the common ones are MongoDB and Cassandra, just in case the name shows up. That we use SQL to read and store information. We use MySQL. So when you take in that course, all the 4 hours of SQL or database section, it is based on MySQL. We're going to install MySQL. We're going to load data into MySQL because, again, it's totally free and it is the most popular database. So definitely, it's a good idea to start practicing with MySQL. And in this lecture also, I'm going to show you examples of MySQL. So SQL. So MySQL is the brand, right? MySQL is just the name of the brand, what kind of database it is. SQL is just an abbreviation for the language, structured query language. Structured query language. Any kind of database you use, you're still going to use SQL with it to read data and write data. And the data itself is stored in a table format. So if you ever used sheets like Google Sheets or Excel, you are very familiar what tables look like. Basically, that sheet is a table. What you see here on your screen, you got a bunch of columns and a bunch of rows. So the column is the structure, what the table looks like, and the rows are the data, and you have pretty much unlimited number of rows. Here is another one. And what makes a relational database is you can have two tables and they have a relationship. One table would have like a list of employees, another table would have like salaries, and there's a relationship. Each employee would have one row in the other table. That's what makes it a relational database. And we're not going to get too much into it because of the time, but just so you understand what a relational database means, the tables are related to each other. Okay. So what does SQL look like when you execute SQL? It looks like the select star from when you're trying to read data. Select star. We're going to look at examples for in just in a minute. And you just got to remember those keywords. Select star from and the table name, right? This will just get you everything from that table name. Select star from, you can give it the database name and then the table name. So you can either do the table name or database name and table name. There are situations where you have to use one versus the other. Just to show you more examples here, those two, like if you want to read information from employees, you can just say select star from employees, select star from mystore.employees. That's the database name or the schema name. But I just wanted so that's basically the same examples I have here with actual table names. But if you want to insert data, there's another SQL, right? Insert into, you just provide the data. If you want to delete data, there is another query, delete from. If you want to update, there is an update query. So it's called, the string itself is called query. So it's another SQL. So when SQL is a whole language, and depending on what you want to do, you want to insert something, you want to read something, if you want to write something, you want to update something, you want to completely drop a table, like delete everything, like destroy it. There are queries like this. And when you're learning SQL, that's what you're going to learn. You're going to learn how do I read, how do I update, how do I insert, things like that. Okay, so let's look at examples, and let's look at example of actually the use case in testing. So when we look at this e-commerce website, for example, let's say I'm testing registration. So I'm going to register a user. When I register a user in the database, what happens? And on the website, I mean, when I register the user on the website, the application takes that information and stores it in the database, right? So when we register, let's register a new user. I'm going to call it tester1 at supersqa.com, and I'm going to give it some random password, and I'm going to click on register, tester1, right? So I just registered this user. The front end said, yeah, you're good to go. The user is registered and you're logged in. But do I just trust what the front end said, or do I go and validate that actually happened? This is just for the login, right? Think about any kind of action you take on a website. So as a QA, depending on how thorough you want to be, you want to go to the database and make sure it actually happened. And sometimes the only option you have is actually to go in the database to make sure something actually happened. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the database. There is a very popular tool called MySQL Workbench. This is MySQL Workbench. You use to connect to MySQL databases. It's one of the most popular tools. That's why we use in the course as well. So I already made the connection. So I made the connection, and we look at the session here. It says I'm connected to this server with this port with this user. So I already created a connection to the database for that website. Every website is going to have a database. You need information to connect to that database. That's the whole thing, right? Server client thing. We all covered that also in that course. So now select star from WP users. This is the two examples I was talking about, right? So we can do, in fact, let me duplicate this line. Just look at the first two lines. We can do either the database name and the table, or just the table. So here I only got the demo store database and the system database. System database is always there. So I have a demo store database. If I expand that, I have tables. If I expand that, all those are different individual tables. So here I can say select star from the database name demo store dot WP user. So there's a table here called WP users that has a list of users. So if I run that, now I get a table that shows me all the users, and by default is going to order them ascending by ID. I can say order by ID descending. I was making mistakes with my query there. There you go. Now it ordered it in a descending order using the ID. So we have an ID column, we have a user login column, we have the password column. The password is hash, it's not the actual password. you have the user nickname and a bunch of things. There's more columns here. Now we look at it, the latest user that was created is tester1, the user we created. Or we could run a specific query saying select star from demostore.wp users where the user email is tester1. That's the user we just created. So now we verified that user is in the table. So you do something, you take action with the application. It can be an API call. It can be just like we did something in the UI, in the user area, you fill out a form. What we just did right now with the registration is we filled out a form, and then we want to make sure that data was captured in the database correctly. And we do that. We go to the database and we run a SQL and we make sure it is in the table. Then in our testing, we're going to make sure, did we get the right login? Did we get the right nickname? Did we get the right email? Is the time correct? Everything else. So this is a very simplified version. It's a simplified test, but an application can be doing a lot of crazy stuff, right? So you go to the database and you make sure things actually happen the way they're supposed to happen. So that's why you need to learn SQL. So you can actually read data from the database or write data from the database. If the application you're testing uses a database, then you might need to go, well, usually you often you need to go and work with the database to make sure the application is doing the right thing. Sometimes your entire job could be just dealing with databases. The whole application might not have a front end. It might be just something that just runs on a server, no UI, some process that runs all the time. So all your testing, all your validation could be just in the database, making sure things are happening correctly in the database, right? So that was a quick introduction of SQL, and try to keep it, under 10 minutes, but I'm ending up being like 13 minutes, but that's okay. But if you want to learn more SQL, you know what to do. All right, so I'll see you on the next one. We're going to talk about APIs, just to give you just like this, a brief overview of what an API is and what does it mean to test APIs.